And that was the g-priv Pro Pod and the g-priv Pod by Smok. Now, you might recognise the name g-priv, mostly because Smok have previously released kind of more box mod style versions of this device. And also, on top of those, you usually get one of the TFV tanks. Now, obviously, Smok have gone more down the pod mod route with two different versions. So let's check them out. The first of the two versions is the g-priv Pro Pod. Pro being that this is a single 18650 device, and of course you access that battery from the base there. You've got quite a solid feeling battery door. Kind of squeeze a little bit in there and you've got a nice flicky action. This, I think, is the best battery door I've seen from Smok ever. Real nice spring to it, nice and solid, clicks in nice and stiff, no battery wobble or anything like that. I know I'm starting with the base first, but that's the most important thing. The battery door is absolutely solid. Now, the g-priv Pro Pod itself is nice and slender, nice and portable. You've got this kind of fairly squishy, pleathery feeling back there, which is really, really nice. Some real blatant branding on the side there, but it still looks pretty cool. It kind of matches the whole industrious look of the device. Of course, on this side, this is your fire bar. You can pretty much fire this from any position. The button feels like it's more at the top, but you can still squeeze this from lower down there, and you still get a nice click. So I really like that fire bar. It works really, really well. Of course, if I switch this back on, you'll see the IQS chipset. Now, this device, single 18650, fires up to 80 watts. You've got your adjustment buttons there. Of course, you can lock the wattage, the power, the buttons. You can also change the colour of the screen. The screen is nice and bright and clear. I do wish it was a little bit taller. They've got enough space there to kind of stretch out a little bit, but it does the job. It works very, very well. Of course, there are slight differences with the g-priv Pod, the internal battery version, but only very minor. We'll go on to them shortly. The last thing to tell you about this, obviously, with the pod tank, which fits into the device, and it's a bit stiff to remove. It kind of squeezes in and out, but you do have adjustable airflow from the top of the device itself, which adjusts from this slider, which, again, can be a little bit stiff, but to be fair, once you set it in place, it's solid, it's firm, it does the job, and of course that adjustment's very, very nice on any kind of pod system. Apart from that, not really many things to complain about or talk about. This is a very simple device, real nice and comfortable. There's a nice weight to this. One thing I do like about this is actually how solid it feels for any kind of pod mod. A lot of them are usually like plastic or some cheapy kind of feel. This one, with the different contrast, with a solid fire button, with this pleathery feel, it feels quite industrious and definitely looks industrious as well. Oh, I forgot to mention as well, this one obviously has a USB Type-C port here on the side. You'll see the other USB port on the internal battery. This has a 1.4 amp maximum charge. Of course, seeing as you use external batteries, strongly recommend you use an external charger. Everything I've just said about the g-priv Pro Pod applies to this one as well, apart from the fact this is an internal battery. 2,500 mAh, and you see there on the base you've got a USB Type-C port. It still has the 1.4 amp maximum charge. It is slightly shorter, ever so slightly shorter. A little bit more stumpy, still provides 80 watts, still has all the other features. The chipset's exactly the same, just the internal battery version. The pod's the same, that's literally it. It's just the internal battery and the USB Type-C port being at the base. But if you want something a little bit more pocket friendly, a little bit shorter, a little bit stumpier, and you're not too bothered about external batteries, or you don't want to buy a separate battery, then this will do the job as well. The pod tank itself has a 5.5mm capacity, unless you're unfortunate enough to get hold of one of the TPD versions, which I guess will be limited to 2mm, and I'm gathered there'll be some kind of rubber bung in there, which might be an absolute pain in the rear end to remove, but I'm not sure, I haven't seen one. A couple of things. First of all, at the top here you've got a drip tip, which is non-removable. It looks kind of 510 shaped, but it's not removable. However, it's fairly comfortable. One of the best features of this device is definitely the slide fill. You just slide that and you access your kind of silicone cover to fill it up. Really easy to fill up. Obviously, once you're done, you close it up. One minor thing with filling it up, as much as it's easy to fill, when that is like that, fitting a 100ml short fill bottle, you do find the drip tip gets in the way a little bit. It's still manageable, it's still doable, but if you are using the larger style bottles, or definitely the larger style tips on those bottles, you might struggle a little bit. Of course, this makes use of the LP2 coils, which are push fit, and I've had very little leakage from these pods. Yes, they are quite dark to see your e-liquid levels. However, I've not really had any problems with them. Overall, 5.5mm capacity and the LP2 coils. We should really try them out. I've got the 0.23 ohm LP2 mesh coil, recommended between 20 and 45 watts. I've got it at the maximum 45 watts. I've got the airflow all the way open. Let's give it a little bash. Definitely one of the better small sub-ohm coils on the market. Decent flavour, nice and sweet, slightly warm at that maximum 45 watts. Handles high VG liquid really, really well. With that airflow open, it's a nice, airy direct lung draw, but not like old school Smok. It's got a slight restriction to it. Nice and warm, decent flavour, very, very good flavour. The thing about these smaller coils is they don't quite bring in as much depth as some of the larger sub-ohm tanks, but they still do a very, very good job. This 0.23 ohm coil has been an absolute joy to use, and even at kind of 30 or 35 watts, which is really low and obviously conserving at battery life, you get a really good vape. Let's try out the 0.4. I've got the 0.4 ohm LP2 coil installed, recommended at best 25 watts, so I've got it at 25 watts. Let's give it a little bash. At 25 watts, you're still getting a really nice direct lung draw with that airflow all the way open. Flavour in comparison to 0.23 doesn't quite match up, but it is still very, very good. Now, the actual restriction, very, very similar to the 0.3. The bore size of that mesh is pretty much the same on both coils, just a different style of mesh. Performance is really, really nice. I do prefer the 0.23, but this 0.4 does do a good job. Slightly cooler at that 25 watts. I do feel you could maybe ramp that wattage up a little bit. In fact, let's give it a go. We're going to go to 35 watts, 10 above the recommended. Let's give that a little bash. Yep, definitely an increase in that warmth. I don't know if the coil will last very long at that higher wattage. I'm actually quite impressed with both coils. The fact they are fairly low resistance, but they don't really require a great deal of power to produce decent vapour and a nice flavour as well. Overall, both coils do a good job. Performance, very, very good. And also, longevity-wise, they've both lasted really well as well. So my final thoughts of the g-priv Pro Pod and the g-priv Pod by Smok. There's a lot of puzz going on there. First of all, we're talking about the kind of quality. I'm really impressed with just generally the build quality of everything with these devices. For usual kind of standard pod mods, we've seen a lot of them. Built really, really well. Nice and solid. I keep going back to the word industrious. They do feel industrious, with just that softness on the back of the edges, kind of soften it a little bit, definitely in the hand. But you can feel the stitching, just something industrious and hard wearing about them. They don't have any kind of IP ratings or anything like that, but they just feel a bit solid. They feel like good pieces of equipment. And like I said before, the battery door on the Pro Pod is really, really good. Definitely lasting longer than some of the previous Smok products. So they've definitely had a good look at those kind of issues, and I think they've improved it. When it comes to performance, both coils are decent. I do prefer the 0.23 ohm coil, but the 0.4 does a very, very good job as well. Again, going back to those coils and resistances, and the requirement of wattage is very low, so you are getting good battery life. That's more important perhaps with the internal battery, where you've got 2,500 milliamp hours of battery life, and you can't replace that battery. So if you're out for the day and you've got an option to charge it, you might be concerned about that battery lasting. But if you do go have a full charge, especially if you're using the 0.4 ohm coil at 25 watts, you're getting a day's battery life, no problems at all. And also with the 1.4 amp USB Type-C port, they charge pretty quick as well. It does take about an hour and a half, just over an hour and a half to charge it from all the way dead to max. But yeah, battery life's been really, really good. One thing I will say, if you do go for the internal battery version, once you get down, once the battery gets not less than half, near about a quarter of its life left, so it's not kind of 10% or 5% left, you do notice the power output starts to kind of get a bit weaker. So as much as you do get a day's life, comfortably get a day's life, you'll see once that battery life gets kind of about a quarter left to go, then yeah, you will notice a drop off in power. I don't really know what to complain about with these devices. I really like the slide feel at the top. That's an excellent addition from Smok. I like the fact you've got this airflow adjustment at the top, although it is a little bit stiff to adjust, but it stays in position. I can't really fault it. There's nothing really bad about these devices. They're all kind of nice features, perform well, battery life's good, feel good in the hand. For Smok products, I'm quite impressed. So I hope that's helpful, folks. If it was, hit the like button or subscribe if you fancy it. Of course, you see my latest video at the top there, a random one there, and a massive thanks to Smok for sending this over for review. I'm Flagger Vapor. Thanks for watching.